taking names and kicking butts. This is Headkicks and Haymakers.
Good morning, fight fans. Welcome to another great episode of Head Kicks and Haymakers. Just doing a quick solo pod. Wanted to get this out because next weekend we'll bring in the boys back in. You guys know what it is. I am that dude Bodkins. The K&K boys. Kenny, no internet. Forgot to pay his bill. No, I'm just kidding. All seriousness, internet was knocked out. And then Craig celebrating his son's birthday yesterday, so he's been busy as well. So wanted to get a Head Kicks and Haymakers episode out because next weekend, obviously the big 281 card, Madison Square Garden. I, we're gonna break all that down, each fight. But I need to talk a little bit about something here on that card. How is I don't quite understand the layout of that card. As we get into it here, let me look at it again. We understand the main and co-main. Love the Izzy Alex Pereira matchup. Carlos Esparza, Zangwelli. We'll get into the strawweight division here in just a minute. Love the Michael Chandler Dustin Poirier matchup. I think that's going to be fight of the night material. This is where I don't like. I don't like Frankie Edgar and Chris Gutierrez being in the pay per view. I would rather see um, Dominic Reyes and Ryan Spann on the pay per view. That matchup matters to me more going forward. Now I get like, hey, this is Frankie's retirement fight. Then why not put Frankie on the prelims, make that your main event prelim? More people will tune in, right? Like, hey, this is Frankie Edgar's a legend in this sport's last fight. Tune into that on the main prelims, and then that'll get people. Then you're running the highlights for the Izzy, the Dustin, and you're running all the promo package as you're getting ready to put on Frankie Edgar's last fight. Somebody came at me, well, Frankie's a legend. He needs to be on behind the paywall. It doesn't matter. He's getting paid the same. I don't think Frankie's getting pay per view points at this point in time in his life. Cowboy retired on the prelims, and it was like the early prelims too. It wasn't even the main event prelims. And Cowboy's just as much, if not more, of a legend than Frankie Edgar. To the casual fan, I don't. I mean, if you compare resumes, Frankie won the belt. So, but to the casual fan, I think if you said, "Hey, do you know who Cowboy Cerrone is?" or "Do you know who Frankie Edgar is?" I think more people probably know who Cowboy Cerrone is. At least know the name, right? Uh, so it's quite interesting that they're putting Frankie, I guess, just due to respect. I mean, it is in New York. Maybe they think, hey, more fans will come in, but why not get the fans there early? Having Frankie on the early prelims and, having that card. The MSG card's always really good. Remember last year they started that card off with Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler. Uh, Still to me, man, that was fight of the year type material. I think I had that as my 2021 fight of the year. Uh, so I mean, that's not quite. We're not quite starting off that banger. Dan Hooker's on this card. A return back to lightweight. Dan went down to featherweight, now back to lightweight as he tries to get on track here. But I'd rather see the Ryan Spann Dominic Reyes fight on the prelims. Surprise, Molly McCann is not on the prelims as well. So you're looking at, these like the last like three fights on the prelim, really pretty good. But why, Molly McCann, I think would be better than Frankie Edgar and Chris Gutierrez, just because like those fights in the Ryan Spann and Dominic Reyes mean more going forward as far as rankings and things like that. I mean, if Frankie wins, he wins. Great. He's retiring. If he loses, hey, you know what? It was, probably should have retired already. Probably should have retired when Cheeto kicked his face off last year. Um, so there's those things. I don't mind Dan Hooker being on the prelim. He's always a good opener. Those fights will be happening. So that's next week. And again, next week we'll be doing our whole UFC pre and post show for 281. I'm excited to break down the fights and talk all the fights with the boys. Let's get into last night. Pretty not a great fight night card, but decent. I struggle. It's just so hard with the Apex and some of these fight nights. I know the main event had fallen off. Originally, this was supposed to be the Bryce Mitchell fight. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Now, I keep saying Donovan Mitchell, Bryce Mitchell. My brain's thinking basketball. Bryce Mitchell be fighting on the UFC 282 card against Iatapora. So that'll be a good fight. But I would have liked to seen Bryce fight on the main event last night to see, just the 5 rounds and get that experience. Unfortunately, those things didn't happen, but I thought still a pretty good card. The Neil Magny and D-Rod fight I was looking forward to. And I mean, Neil Magny, the legend, does it again. Neil Magny has now passed GSP for the most wins in welterweight history, folks. Who would have ever thought we'd say that? He's been around a long time. Taps out D-Rod in the third. It was a heck of a fight. D-Rod won the first round, I thought. Neil won the second, and then tapped him out in the third. So, D-Rod, I don't mind D-Rod. He's beaten some guys. I thought I thought in the last fight was, he took the Yi Jingalong fight on short notice when that whole 279 mess a couple months ago. Did like this fight, nice step up, but to prove that Neil Magny proves that, hey, I'm still the guy. I'm still a guy in this division. I can still beat a lot of these up and comers that are trying to happen. Who would I like to see Neil fight kind of going forward? He called out Gilbert Burns, said, hey, let's turn around and fight in January in Brazil. I don't mind that fight. It's a huge jump up. If you look at it from ranking standpoint, he fought. So Neil Magny is 13, and he's trying to fight Gilbert Burns, who's 5. That's a huge jump. But Burns has got some options, and he's been reported to link up with Jorge Masvidal. Jorge's got a lot of stuff going on. I'd like to see Burns and Shavkat, or Luque's coming off a loss, somebody like that. Maybe even Sean Brady. Maybe you do him and Gilbert Burns. In Brazil. Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad. That's number 4 and 5. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I do think I'd like to see Burns be on the Brazil card. I think that's a great setup. Speaking of the Brazil card, it looks. I don't know if the former lightweight champ Charles Oliveira is going to be on that card. It looked like him and Faziz, and he said, I'm going to take some time off, but I think by January he's got to be on that card. Like, that's his home country. Should have had the title fight, like you were talking about doing that title fight there in Brazil. So just because you lost, now you're taking some time off. Keep the same energy. As much as I'd like to, I don't like to see that him and Faziz fight. I think that's a bad matchup because I'm a big Faziz fan. I'd like to see him and Dariush fight. And Dariush wins. He's probably the next in line for the lightweight. We know the lightweight titles should be happening in February against Volkanovski and Islam. So, that could happen. Back to last night, though. D-Rod loses. He was number 14. I'd like to see him and Yi run it back in at proper weight and give them a full camp. Yi Jingalong is not even ranked anymore in the welterweight. That's sad because he probably should be. But give him that. you know, so I'd like to see that a rematch of that fight. Maybe yeah, him or Michael Piera could fight. So there's some names out there for D Rod. For Neil Magny again, I'd like to see him fight. What if him and Jorge fought? I don't think, you know, I'd like to keep Shafkat keep fighting forward. Um, Maybe him and Sean Brady. I know I just said Burns, but I'm kind of looking at some guys that, you know, I mean, if they did him and Burns in Brazil, why not? Like, hey, Neil will fight anybody. Remember, this is Neil Magny's a guy who's when nobody else would fight Hamza, him and Leon Edwards were about the only two people that were clamoring for that fight. I felt like him and Neil Magny should have fought a long time ago, like 20, even way back when I think it was Leon that dropped out first, and then they rebooked it, and then Hamza got COVID, but I felt even like really Neil Magny versus Hamza should have happened before Neil and Yi Jingalong. But I liked both of those fights. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Neil Magny's a guy, man. Like we just said, he is the all-time wins in welterweight division. That's not an easy task. I mean, passes GSP. Obviously, GSP is the GOAT of the welterweight division, is the one of the top GOATs in MMA history. Probably has got to be on the Mount Rushmore of MMA, I would believe, for my lifetime, like very high on him. Uh, I would put him over Khabib. I think John Jones has got to be there. I think, but GSP over John Jones because the controversy that comes with John Jones. But yeah, I mean those guys got GSP's got to be right there. So, but Neil Magny has now passed him for most wins in the welterweight division. I mean Neil's always been a guy that's ready to fight anytime, any place. So hey, reward the man and give him Gilbert Burns in January, and let's see what happens. In the main event, man, it was a good main event last night in the strawweight division as Marina Rodriguez, who was ranked number 3, she took on Amanda Lemos, and man, Lemos has got freaking hands, folks. The first round probably gave it to Marina. And then after that, though, Lemos just put it on her, knocked her out. Really, it was like a standing knockout. I know some people on Twitter were saying, "Hey, that fight," but she wasn't really there. Her hands are down. She got knocked out, and they just started pounding her. Then she finally put the hands up. Maybe it was a little bit early. I mean, we've seen some early stoppages before, but she wasn't really quite defending herself at that point in time. Uh, is Lemos next for the strawweight division? I mean, Carlos Esparza versus Wei Lee is next weekend. Lemos said, "Hey, I'll be the backup fighter. Why not?" I'd like to see Lemos and Rose fight. Rose has been MIA since she lost since earlier this year when boring. That was the worst fight of the year. Esparza and Rose and Esparza wins the title, and now she's defending against Wei Lee, who I think Wei Lee's gonna get her belt back and be a two-time champ. She was obviously Wei Lee's coming off the win against Joanna Jacek. But I would like to see that for Lemos more than probably the title. And if Rose wins, is anybody clamoring for Rose? If Wei Lee wins and Rose wins, if let's say they do that, do you do Rose in Wei Lee 3? I don't know anybody clamoring for that either. I mean, if you're Rose, that's what you want because you beat her. Nobody's definitely clamoring for a Sparza Rose 3. If I have to sit through that, I'd rather freaking pull my freaking eyeballs out if I have to sit through Rose Esparza 3. 2 was the worst fight of the year. Absolute worst fight of the year. Hands down. But give Lemos Rose And I like that. Had Marina won, I probably would have said that even the same thing. Like I feel like Rose has got to be. They got to get one more, or you know, maybe you do Marina. Maybe the loser fights Lemos here, a spot between next like Saturday. So this works out perfect for Lemos. For Marina, she could fight Rose. I would like to see that. Both coming off a loss. We haven't seen Rose in a while. So like again, so I'd like to see one of them fight Rose, and maybe one of them fight the loser of the title. Um, you know, so they're both right there, but that was a huge win for Lemos last night. I mean, she was 7 fight, the number 3 ranked, and had Marina put on a good showing, they might have said, "Hey, yeah, she's next in line after uh, Saturday, next Saturday on 270 or 281." So incredible, nice little fight night card. I think like if you combined last Saturday's and this Saturday's fight card. Like that's the thing. Some of these fight cards are just a little bit too thin. Uh, you know, you combine a couple of them, and if you just get them out of the Apex, seems like Dana's done with the Apex going forward next year in 2023. It looks like the UFC will be back in full business, making money, going places. We've kind of said this before. Me and Craig talked about it a little bit last Sunday morning. Um, so there's all that. Yeah, I mean that kind of wraps it up, man. Like there's not a whole lot to talk about. Just a nice little quick fight night. Wanted to get this out, remind everybody, hey, we will be back in full force next weekend for UFC 281 post show preview show and post show. Preview show should be Saturday morning. We might even do it Friday night. I'll have to get with the boys to see kind of what works better. And then we'll do our UFC post show Sunday morning. So 281. Excited for all 3 fights, all the fights on 281. We just kind of went over them. I'll be looking forward to those. A couple fights made for next year already. I was trying to look here. Um, and we'll kind of yeah. Nothing major, like no major fights have been made. Other than how about Rob Whitaker and Paulo Costa? That fight is set. That's like the biggest fight set so far that we know of. Other than in that site, that's signed contract already. It seems like both the fighters agreed, and that's going to be in Australia. I would have liked to see Paulo fight somebody else in Brazil. Let him get the Brazil rub. But I guess he's going to go fight Bobby Knuckles and what could potentially be if Alex Piera wins next Saturday, could be a number 1 contender fight. I mean, Paulo wins that. He beats Bobby Knuckles. He probably deserves another shot at the title, especially if it's not Izzy. If Izzy loses, and they'll probably run it back, depending on how that fight happens. But they might run that back. It'll be interesting. A lot to get into. But if Izzy wins, man, what's next for him at middleweight? Like, who's next? He cleaned out everybody. Uh, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens next weekend as that middleweight division will open up if Alex Piera can knock out and beat Izzy. That middleweight division will open up. I mean, you're looking at it right now, looking at the rankings. So, I mean, Izzy's beat Robert Whitaker twice, beat Jared Cannonier, beat Marvin Vittori. Now he's fighting Alex Piera. If he beats him, that's the number 4 guy. Derek Brunson, he hasn't beat Derek Brunson, but I mean, Derek Brunson's number 5, and he's coming off a loss. Beat Paulo Costa. Sean Strickland coming off a loss like at 7. Like Sean's gonna have to, you know what I mean? He's like 2 wins away. Jack Hermansson's coming off a win at 8, but you're not gonna fight all the way to 8. You know what I mean? Like there's nobody else. He's always kind of had a thing for Darren Till, but Darren Till's going to have to get some wins going. And then, you look at Kevin Gastelum at 11, beat him. Like, he's beaten all these guys, all the top guys. But it's like, who's left for him? And then none of these guys can get past Robert Whitaker. So what I'm saying is, what I'm proposing here is, if Alex can win next Saturday and do his part, and they might run that back, I'm sure they will. Would they run that back as close as February? In February in Australia. I mean, Izzy's not from Australia; he's from New Zealand. But I mean, do you do that? And then, like, if Izzy loses, possibly February's close. I mean, you got 2 months. Yeah, I mean, that's a quick turnaround. Just all depends on what happens, right? On Saturday. I'm looking forward to that fight in particular. I mean, it's going to be a good one, folks. I say that, but I don't think Alex Pereira will take the fight. Like, Izzy's kind of been in these, like, really, he's the most tactical counter striker in the UFC. He's very much like a Floyd Mayweather. And as far as, like, his fights aren't like fun to watch, they're not exciting, but they're tactical, you know what I mean? And but Alex Pereira is going to try to go in there and knock him out. He's done it. But Izzy slides out in kickboxing. There's video. You know what I mean? Like, he's 2-0 against this guy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the octagon and not a kickboxing ring. But so I made all this to say, like, again, Robert Whitaker versus Paulo is happening in February in Australia. If Whit wins that one and Alex Pereira wins, and let's just say they do the rematch, and then, maybe set up Whit and Pereira, or, Paulo wins, Paulo could say, hey, man, I deserve another crack at the title. Paulo is so much better when I feel like he feeds off the fans' energy. Like, you watch his Apex stuff where there's not a fans, it just didn't seem right. But I'm enjoying this babyface Paulo Costa run here. If you follow him on Twitter, it's definitely worth the follow. So, I mean, that's kind of biggest fight I've seen kind of announced. Haven't seen a whole lot more. Let me scroll through here again real quick before we get up out of here. Let's look here. Oh, I guess Jared Cannonier, Sean Strickland will be the last fight night of the year. That's kind of a big one in the middleweight. Two guys coming off a loss. Fought on the same card. That fight was supposed to happen earlier, but Sean got hurt, I believe, and at least they rebooked it where it needs to be. That's happening December 17th. So look for that one. That's the last fight night of the year. Then we have fight night 114. Then we get into next year. They have a fight night scheduled for January 14th, but there's now that hasn't been listed yet. Then you look at UFC 283. We do know we're getting Figgy Moreno 4. I mean, those guys have fought 3 times. I can tell you that who won one of those times. Outside of that, then you look at and this is the Brazil card. So I think they're going to try to get Amanda Nunes on that card. How about Amanda and Valentina on that card? That would be a huge Brazil card. That's the Brazil card, UFC 283. And then, you could still add Charles and Dariush on that card. So that would be 3 huge Brazilians on that card. And then because you add Davis and Figueroa for the flyweight title. And then you have Lauren Murphy versus Jessica Andrade in the women's flyweight. That's a huge match. Paul Craig versus Johnny Walker. So yeah, there's some. I mean, that's on the 283 card coming up, and then you look at 284. There's only 2 fights listed so far, and that's the Robert Whitaker versus Paulo Costa fight, and then the Tyson Pedro versus Yang Ming Yang in the light heavyweights. So it seems like Tyson Pedro hasn't fought in forever. I don't know if he's just been hurt, but the guy's got some hands. Can knock some people out fighting in his home country in Australia as well. So very interesting. Couple fights, coming this way. I'm excited. Next weekend's the big, obviously, MSG card, man. I'm super, I don't know if I'm more excited for the Pierre Izzy fight or that Chandler and Dustin Poirier fight, man. I love both those guys. Love both the way they fight. I like them as dudes, just like as a people that you can follow. And they seem like they could be best friends, like guys that could get along. But they just in the same division, do the same thing, go about business their same way. Man, it's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be a real exciting fight. So, in that winner, again, could make the case that they could be possibly next in line for the title now that Islam is next. I don't like either one of them. I like to see Chandler and Islam fight because his wrestling is he's all-American wrestler. Poirier's not. We've kind of seen what Islam did. We saw what not Islam, but Khabib did to Dustin. Chandler's never fought either one of those guys. Did get knocked out by Charles Oliveira. So, it'll be interesting to see because how Chandler fights. Like, I would like to see that matchup more than I like to see Poirier, Islam. I'd like to see Chandler, Islam more. I just think that fight would be – it's still favor Islam, but I think Chandler would have the better chance. So, hey, we'll see what happens, folks. I like both those guys, man. It's fight of the year candidate. At the end of the year, I know we're going to do a year end of the year rewards, awards, and then we'll do like, hey, what fight we're looking forward to next year. That'll happen sometime next month. So, anyway, the boys will be back next Sunday or Saturday and Sunday for our pre and post show. We might do it Friday night. We'll talk to the boys, see what works out better for their schedule. But we'll be back tonight as well. UFC for our NFL Week 9 reaction show on the Bodkin Show here channel and on Let's Talk Sports. Also, you can catch me on Let's Talk Sports here in about 2 hours, 9:45 for our NFL Sunday kickoff show. So please join us. Be a friend, tell a friend, folks. This has been another great episode of Head Kicks and Haymakers. I'm going to hit that outro. We'll catch you all on the flip side.